welcome back to the channel. As you can tell here, we have a little bit of a sketch already kind of completed here, and we're going to move into the next phase of our drawing where we get into the inking of our Rick and Morty piece. Now, if you're just seeing this video as one of the first in the series, let me just offer you a little reminder that there are a couple of videos that came prior to this that kind of set up the steps to laying out the basic drawing, the basic shapes, and leading us up to the point where we have something of a finished rough sketch, ready to move on into inks. So if you haven't had a chance to see those videos, I'll put up a little reminder card up in the upper right-hand corner there. Go check them out. And for everybody that's watching, regardless of which video you're starting on, hey, don't forget to click that subscribe button, click that like button. Don't forget to share, leave comments. Anything you can do to help support the channel is always appreciated. All right, so I've got the shameless plug out of the way. Remember, we're here today to talk a little bit about inking, so let's get into it. Again, I got my kind of finished rough sketch here of Rick and Morty. Just a little bit of a review on where we are in our layer stack. I have the original rough still in here. I don't really need to hang on to it anymore, but just because I have plenty of layers available to me, I am. Again, I've got the layer that we're on right now that basically shows our finished rough sketch with most of our fine line work complete. I still have a few little tweaks here and there I'm going to do, but that's stuff that I can definitely accomplish during the inking phase because it's just really kind of minor stuff at this point. Little minor things that kind of probably bug me and nobody else. We'll kind of put it that way. All right. Now, I want to go back into this layer here, and I want to lower the opacity of it just so that way it's really obvious where my ink lines are, but I still want to be able to see the drawing kind of come through so it's really obvious where I should be laying down those inked areas. I'm going to move into a new blank layer, and now let's take a look at our brushes. So I'm going to be doing an inking layer over top of my sketch. And when I go into my brushes here, I have two main inking brushes that I use depending on what my need is for the drawing. I have one that's called a non-taper, and I have another one that's called a new taper. And again, I mentioned brushes kind of in the first video in this series and in a couple of other videos I've done about getting into some of the finer works of the coloring phase and things like that. So I'll kind of sum everything up just to let you know that I don't really use a whole lot of fancy brushes. I don't download them, I don't buy them, I don't seek them out. I basically just take whatever it is that Procreate's given you, or given to me, and make some small tweaks to meet my needs. The new taper brush is a really good example of this. There's a whole inking section here, and under the Procreate default tools here, I've just basically taken the new inker there and just made some tweaks to it. And usually the only tweaks I've ever really made is just increasing the maximum opacity and increasing the maximum size. All right, so if you increase the maximum size, it allows you to get some thicker lines if that's what you're going for. Now, just because I made those little tweaks, I kind of put it under my favorite, and again, I have the taper there, okay? Now, the non-taper is a little bit different. The big thing with the taper is that it allows you to draw almost as if you're drawing comic books. The pressure that you put on the pen there will give you a thicker line, but it will always kind of taper off to a little point at the end, just like so, okay? And I can, again, lower or shrink the width of that line by using the tool on the right here. But notice how everything has these kind of tapered ends to it, which is going to be really handy when I do certain types of inking work in this piece. But as I said before, I also have one called non-taper. Now this is the same exact brush as the new taper, but all I've done here is I've completely eliminated the size and opacity of the taper. So it's always going to be the same thickness from beginning to end. There is no point that kind of comes off at the end. Now this is really handy if I'm doing things that require really straight lines that don't waver, like edges of buildings or bricks or stuff like that where we get into detail work. So let me go ahead and clear that out here. Again, I'm going to layer just over top of my rough sketch, and I'm going to start off with my new taper brush. I just want to make sure I don't get too big here too quick. So I'm going to kind of lower the size of this here a little bit, and then we're just going to kind of start in. Now, just like my rough sketch, I'm going to be spending a lot of time separating various body parts and various elements in the drawing into different layers. Once I have a piece of this I'm satisfied with, I don't want to run the risk of having to go back and erase over it later. So once I've got the head roughly figured out, it'll stay on its own layer, and I'll create a new layer to go into the torso, the body, the gun, and etc. Later, I may collapse those layers just for organizational purposes, but, for right now, I've got plenty to play with, so why not use it to help preserve some of my good work once, I achieve that good work. So let's go ahead and get started into this, and we'll get into Rick's head to kind of start off. Now, Again, just like before, we have this largely oval type thing we're doing here. And in previous videos, what I've done is I've kind of showed you how you draw the oval. And if your line's a little wonky or wavy, Procreate will autocorrect and make a nice smooth oval for you. I'm not going to do that this time. This time I'm going to play with the curves here a little bit. Just kind of show you how this works. I just drew a curve here. I keep the point of the pencil down on the screen. And after I stop drawing, it kind of takes all the waviness out of my line and gives me a nice smooth curve there. And I want to do it over here on the other side of the head as well. And get everything to join up. And notice that gives me a nice, smooth, almost professional looking line. Now, I'm not going to worry about line weights yet. I'm not worried about the thickness of the line where it tapers and stuff like that. I'll make little corrections on that as I go along. And as the piece starts to develop, I'll make some judgment calls on where I want thicker lines and thinner lines. And when that time comes, we'll have a little bit of a further discussion on it. But in the meantime, all I'm really doing is just tracing over the lines that I've already created in my rough drawing. Now, here's the little problem we run into here. Sometimes if you do too much of a curve like this S shape, Procreate doesn't understand what that is and tries to straighten out the line. So I don't want that. The key here, and this is something I brought up before in my last video where we were talking about smooth lines, is just trying to let your arm do the work for you. Your arm and your elbow kind of have this natural tendency to move in a very specific smooth arc. And if you kind of embrace that and kind of just put in these nice smooth lines with, an amazing amount of boldness and confidence, you may find that you like the end result, you may find that you don't. And the thing about that is if you don't, Procreate and digital tools like it make it very easy just to back that out and start over again. So if I draw this circle and I don't like it, oh well, I just rewind one step and it comes out and nobody ever has to know that mistake ever existed. And the beauty of creating smooth lines like this is that it does give your character a little bit more life. Less stiffness might be another way to kind of explain it. Now, sometimes you get the line perfect the first time, and I'm overusing this term in some of these videos, but I still think it applies. We'll steal Bob Ross's term, call it a happy accident. But hey, if you make one of those happy accidents and the line comes out perfect in the first try, well, look, don't negate it, don't erase it, keep it. Count your lucky stars, pat yourself on the back, and take credit for the job well done when that time comes. All right, so there we go. We're starting to kind of phase in a lot of the parts that we need here. And again, just whenever necessary, and I need like a nice smooth curve, I'm going to let Procreate just kind of help me out with that. When necessary, I can go back, kind of join lines together later and smooth things out a little bit more if it's necessary, but so far, so good. All right, so one of the other things you may have noticed by now is if you're going a little bit crazy watching me here, I do tend to turn the canvas a lot as I draw. This is something that kind of comes back to me working with pen and ink on real paper. Turning things around to get different angles that I want often has helped me achieve some of the smooth lines that I'm trying to create in these pieces. All right, so I think we're pretty satisfied with the head there. It's tempting to just kind of make this its own layer, but since I'm here, I'm going to go ahead and do the hair too. And again, just like before, I'm going to try to get a nice smooth line in there with a little bit of a curve or an arc. If I'm not happy with it, I'll just back it out and try it again. But so far, so good. I just increase the thickness there a little bit so it just makes sense for those two lines to join together. All right, so I want my tapered end really more than anything to end up at the point of the hair, just like so. We'll do our best to join that together a little bit better. There we go. And we'll come around here and finish it off. Now notice I'm not following the lines exactly. I want to use my rough sketch as a guideline, but I just don't want to be completely beholden to it. There might be other little additional tweaks that happen when you do the ink work here that might be better than when you did the original rough sketch to begin with. So, don't assume that there's nothing new or innovative to do to your drawing once you move to the inking phase. Sometimes just staying loose and using the rough sketch as a guideline and nothing else is really kind of the mentality to have with it. All right. So I think I got a little something there that I'm happy with. And I'm really just kind of zooming in and zooming out, mostly just kind of check where my lines connect. Because one of the sloppiest things you can do with line work is have points where it doesn't, or you need to do like minor corrections, like right here. Too much thickness right here doesn't make sense. I'm going to kind of tweak it a little bit, and then just make sure everything is just kind of consistent with its thickness, just like so, and a little bit more right there. All right, so fairly happy with that. Let's go ahead and we'll move on to the other side of his hair. I'm going to shorten that line up there a little bit, and then we'll get our swoop in. Just a swoop just like that. I'm not quite happy with it. We'll try to, no, that's not it either. And I'm just going to keep doing this a couple more times until I get that roughly the way I like it. I might have it. Let's zoom out and see how it looks. Yeah, we'll take that. That's fine. All right, moving on to the next little swoop. And just doing our best to be patient and let the line kind of create itself, and keeping it intact once you're happy with it, just like that. All right, I think I'm relatively happy with that. I'm going to do one last thing and add in the neck, just like so, and we will call this a completed layer, at least, for right now. Just get that in the way I like it. There we go. All right, so let's go ahead and we'll move into another layer here. Well, I'm just going to take an empty one and just kind of move it down underneath the head and select it. And now we're going to go ahead and start moving into the torso. Now, there's a lot of overlapping going on here, so I think my best bet might be just to kind of start with the gun and moving towards the background from that point. So let's go ahead here. I'm going to just lower the size of the brush here just slightly so I can work on some of the detail work on the gun. And yet again, I'm going to use this little Procreate's ability to correct some of my wonky lines to help me put in some of the detail in this gun. Now, guns and machinery, and maybe it's better said as a futuristic gun in this sake, futuristic guns, technology, machinery, things like that, tends to exist with a certain amount of precision when those things are developed and built. And so I've got to try my best to represent that level of precision in the drawing I'm creating here. If my gun looks sloppy, it's not going to look like a gun because guns are not made in sloppy ways. They are, in fact, again, precision pieces of equipment that must have nice clean lines, nice clean edges, and so on and so forth. It's essential for a gun to work properly. If it's not properly balanced and created and I guess milled to a nice precision size, then you're going to have a gun that doesn't fire. And obviously that defeats the purpose of what it's meant for. So we're going to make sure that we keep our lines just kind of nice and precise. Clean might be the better way to explain it, because that helps sell the object that we're trying to create here. Now, I am going to shrink the point of this down here a little bit because I just kind of realized it's not really centered in this longer barrel piece of the gun here. So I think I'm just going to kind of put it in there like that, and we'll draw the rest of the barrel piece around it now. Now, this is probably a good idea to move on to my non-taper brush. I've been kind of struggling with this a little bit and trying to keep my lines consistent. And again, with things like this that are meant to be precision pieces of equipment, consistent line work that doesn't vary in width is really kind of the better way to go with this. So I'm going to use my alternate inking brush here for this. And again, notice what I'm up to here. I'm basically just drawing my lines, and then I'm allowing Procreate to straighten them out for me, so that way I get the nice precision look that I'm really trying to attempt to achieve with this piece. All right, so there we go. That's a little bit sloppy. Let me just, there we go. All right, so far so good. And the line goes down here, and the line that comes up there. And we'll go ahead and kind of sketch in the rest of our lines here. Now, this might actually be a good time to talk just briefly about line weight. When I say the term line weight, what I'm referring to is the change in thickness or width from one of your ink lines to the next. There is a logic behind it. There's a reason you want to be aware of it and use varying line widths to your benefit. But as I said before, there's a logic to it. There's a rhyme and a reason behind it. I kind of figured it out the hard way by making mistakes along the way. I've also done a little bit of research and read a couple of those how-to books on topics. So there's a lot of reference material out there if you want to go seeking it out that'll explain why you want to employ certain tricks and methods to varying your line weights and ultimately what it means and when to do it. I've kind of narrowed it down to two main reasons. One, contrast. And what I mean by that is that sometimes a thicker line compared to a thinner line will create a certain amount of contrast that will help something, to look bold and kind of pop off the page, so to speak. All right. So you're not really, we can take a look at it right now and see some examples on the page here. Take a look at Rick's head. The lines there are much thicker than the lines that are in the gun here. So Rick's head tends to stand out a little bit more because of how bold it is compared to the thinner lines of the gun. I can also do this when I get into some of the detail work on the gun. So I'm drawing kind of the basic outline of it right now, but what I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to shrink down the size of my pen just a little bit more, and I'm going to use that smaller size to draw in some of the detail lines in this gun. And what you're going to notice here is those detail lines are going to help add some precision, no doubt. But what they also do is they create that kind of a sense that there is something smaller and more intricate in the gun itself. Again, these details just kind of give you that sense of precision. But there's a lot going on here. This is a precision piece of equipment. You're not meant to see every part and understand exactly how it functions, but it's obviously, in some way, shape, or form, complex. All right. Now, again, that's just reason number one to worry about thick versus thin. The other one, and this is one you see a lot more when we get into comic book work versus cartoon, is to represent 3D or three-dimensional form. So let's just get into that a little bit. Three-dimensional form in the sense that the thicker your line, the more you're indicating that that's the area that's facing away from the light, the area where shadow will end up. And that's kind of the theory behind how pen and ink works, at least with most comic books. The premise being that anywhere a line is drawn, it's representing some sort of a shadow in at least some way, shape, or form. So if I was to say for just a moment here that my light source was coming from right here, that means that all the lines opposite of the light source are going to be thicker than the ones that butt up against it. So this arm, for instance, would be a lot thicker of a line over here than it would be at the area where the shoulder faces that light source. This helps give you an illusion, something that fools the eye into thinking that this character, even though it's just made out of lines, is in some way, shape, or form slightly three-dimensional, has depth, and creates some sort of a idea that's popping off the page a little bit. Now, you're not seeing it right now totally because we don't have most of our line work in, but that's the premise that we're working with here. At least that's the goal that we're working towards. And we will try to enhance and tweak and move things around with our line work to get that final effect before we move into our coloring phase. So I'm kind of belaboring the point here a little bit, I'm hoping you get it. But if you don't, feel free to leave some questions in the comments, and we'll do a little bit more focused video on line weights. As having said that, I'm going to move back into my taper brush because we're back into kind of organic flesh now, and I want to get that kind of loose feeling that you get when you're drawing a life, so to speak. And I don't want a stiff pose on Rick. I want him to look like he looks natural in his environment. And so I want to be very free, loose, casual. My line work, as long as I know that I can be confident in those lines going where I want them to go and representing the form that I want to represent. All right. So there we go. And And notice, just like in the last video where we were taking a look at the last phase of our rough sketch, you may now notice the line work is going in pretty quick here. Not a lot of delay in shoving this in, just because we've already got a plan laid out as to where we want everything to go. All right, so far so good. I'm actually kind of happy with that. Time to check out another layer here. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and just create another layer. There we go, and we'll start getting into the other portions of the torso here. So let's get into the lab coat next. And the lab coat, let's see here. We'll just kind of, there we go. And notice what I'm doing here. I've got this lab coat line overlapping the gun. I'm going to go back and just erase the excess of it later, but I want a nice bold line going into the gun, uninterrupted, so that way it doesn't. It looks like it actually falls behind the gun rather than stopping where the gun starts. All right, so let me get back into our brushwork here, and let's do this. We'll get the lapel in. And not quite happy with the lines the first couple tries, so I'll just back them out and try again. Very typical of how I work. It just takes a little bit of patience and making sure I'm pleased with the final result. All right, so far so good. We can get in the shoulder now. There we go. And nice long arm there. And not really happy with the way that ended there, so I'm just going to cut that off. And we will try to draw the elbow in a little bit better than that. There we go. Now I'm doing a lot of zooming in here. I tell you, a lot of artists would recommend against this. Drawing, especially if you're not only drawing but also looking to do painting, or at least digital painting, the most common piece of advice is going to be to zoom out. Get this as small as you can, so that way you can see the whole piece and make sure that you're managing, proportion and that an anatomical proportion, perspective, and things like that. And I got to admit, they're right. The mistakes that I tend to make tend to occur because I'm so focused on these little detailed areas that I sometimes miss the fact that I let the perspective get away from me a little bit. So what I try to do as much as possible is draw in a couple lines as close up as I want to draw them, and then back it off a little bit, recenter the piece, take a look at the piece as a whole occasionally, and just make sure I'm not going completely off the deep end on any of the lines I put down. Remember, I always have the ability to back out 5, 6, 10, 15 lines if I have to, which can be a little bit of a waste of time. But again, I've just kind of gotten comfortable with a certain way of drawing, and it's one that I've kind of embraced, so I'm just going to kind of keep working with it. But maybe this is one of those great opportunities to say something along the lines of do as I say, not as I do. Try not to zoom in so much, and I think that you'll find that it helps quite a bit to keep everything proportioned to each other and certainly in perspective. I can work with that. I'm just going to thicken this up a little bit as it meets the arm, and then we'll just have another little thing coming out there for the wrinkle in the jacket, and then a nice bold line right here representing his back. All right, so check that out. The line here, nice and thick here, because it's definitely far away from the light. I might even go just a slight bit thicker with it because I know I can get away with it. And it's a really good example of where a bold line really should be. Now, this opposite of the arm here also is a little bit skinny too, so I'm going to thicken up this line a little bit too. But generally speaking, when I'm looking to thicken up lines, I really don't do it in the midst of the drawing like I am right now. The better time to really do this is when you've got all your line work in. Get everything drawn, get everything inked, and then you can go back with an eraser or your pen and thicken or thin out things when you've got the whole piece done and you can look at the thing as the big picture, so to speak. All right, so there's a little piece of advice on that one. Okay, now hands. Hands can be a little bit of a pain to draw. This is one of those ones where I got to tell you, I don't have any magic tricks really, other than some stuff that other people have told me in the past. Through my own research of watching YouTube videos and seeking out, channels that focus on artwork and things like that. So one of the better people, I think, at drawing hands, in my opinion anyway, is Jim Lee. Really great comic book artist. He works for DC Comics. And that guy draws hands like nobody's business, and he's actually done a couple tutorials here and there on it. So let's keep that as is. All right, so I've got some layers here that I messed around with. I can delete those. I've got a bunch of layers here I think that can be joined together now to represent the torso and the gun. I'm fairly happy with that. But I'm going to add another layer here, and the reason I'm doing that is because I want to put in this line right here, and I want to make sure that it's straight. This one right here. Just want to make sure it's nice and straight, and it continues through the hand and behind the hand, or both hands, the way, excuse me, the way that it should. So I've got it laid in. Let me go ahead and just erase the parts that shouldn't be there, like so. And perfect, it lines up the way that I wanted to. And I have a similar mistake I made, I think, on the line down here, so I'm just going to get rid of that. And I'm going to do the same trick again. So let me just get rid of that line. It just wasn't proper in terms, or it wasn't lined up properly in perspective. So let me get that. And all I have to do is go into that new layer, and I'm going to use the line that we've already kind of established right here to figure out where this should be. And roughly around there is good enough. Again, I'm going to erase the parts that I don't need. And I think what we might do over here is just sticking out that line a little bit, just so it matches up a little bit better. Yeah, I'll take it. Okay. Again, I usually say this for a little bit later, but since I'm just happening to be looking at it, we'll go ahead and just thicken up some of the lines here along the underarm. Since we know that's definitely sitting away from the light. Let's see, what else? Yeah, I'm going to do the undercarriage of this gun here a little bit as well. Just get that a little bit thicker in here, because I know that that's going to give it some depth. All right, pretty good so far. All right, let's go ahead and just join those lines together just so we don't miss out on that. Now we can start a new layer and finish up the rest of the torso here. So let's just go ahead, and we had a line that started on the edge of this jacket. So I'm going to go ahead and just continue that line a little bit all the way down. Remember, this is on a new layer, so I can kind of get away with this overlapping over the gun in the hand. I'll just erase the parts that I don't need right now. So we can get rid of this. And we can get all that stuff up there out of the way. And we don't need it to be quite this long, so we can end it right about there. And I think we got a nice little something to look at. All right, next up, I'm going to thicken up the line here on the lapel just a bit. Get everything kind of tightened up around that gun in hand that I didn't do before. There we go. Let's take that. And again, get rid of the parts we don't need. Just thicken it up a little bit at the top. And then we can come in here and get the other section of his torso there. And then we can punch in the rest of his arm. And kind of finish this one off here for the most part. To be honest, Rick has much thinner arms than what I've rendered here, but as I've mentioned several times now, this is really going to kind of be a mix of my style and the cartoon style. My style is coming into this because it allows me to work quickly and not make these 3-hour videos. I can make them in about 15-20 minutes if I can just kind of feel comfortable using my own way of drawing rather than trying to mimic another artist. It can be done. The great thing about watching other artists or looking at other artists for influence in your work is that you can learn quite a bit from it. And I'm actually going to be doing a series of videos in the near future that kind of speaks to that point in a lot more detail and a lot more emphasis. Here's the thing. I'm not a fan of tracing. Tracing is never a good thing, but taking a look at other people's artwork and using it as a model to draw and learn from is a great thing. And if you can learn to mimic other artists' styles, then you have the ability at that point to take those styles, kind of mix them together, and create your own unique style based off of what you learned from other artists. This is not a unique way of doing things. This is something that artists have been doing, professional artists have been doing, as far as I know, since the Renaissance era. Da Vinci had a master that he trained under, and when he trained under that master, his job was to basically paint backgrounds, while the master that he was apprenticing, so if that's a word, the master that he was apprenticing under would draw in and paint in the figures, and as a young apprentice, Da Vinci would just work on the backgrounds. But the point was that he had to do that in the master's style. He had to learn to paint exactly like the master, to the point that they were almost indistinguishable. And then at that point, he was considered to be successful. And to that effect, bear in mind here that eventually his own style emerged from it and became the painter that we know today, also having people that studied under him and learning his style in that matter. This is not a bad thing. It's how you learn, you know? All right, so I think we got everything we need here for Rick. I'm going to just tweak a couple little small things here. There was just a smaller part of his ear right here that I just wanted to kind of correct to get that a little bit better. There we go. Let's see. Oh, yeah, and on the torso, I want to take all these lines here at the bottom and connect them all together. And I want to make sure they're all nice and closed off and neat. It may seem a little bit silly since I'm going to have something sitting over top of it to blend them into the portal a little bit later on, but this is going to be really handy when we get into our coloring phase a little bit later. So bear with me. That's going to be in the next video. I'll talk about the why when we get to that part. All right. So again, I'm relatively happy with my Rick figure. I'm going to kind of put that one to bed, and we're going to go ahead and move on to Morty. So let me just get a couple of open layers for that here, and we will get in to this one. All right, now we talked about this in our rough sketch phase. Morty's head isn't really much more than just a big old circle. Drawing circles with the taper tool can sometimes get a little bit wonky. You see how the edges don't match up at the end there. So with Morty's head, I am going to go with my non-taper brush on this, just to make sure I have a nice clean circle to work off of. So I'm just going to thicken up the line there a little bit, just give it the right thickness to kind of match up with Rick to a certain degree. There we go. And we will get our circle in, just like that. Now again, how did I do this? Okay, so I drew the circle. It was wonky. It was not quite a circle. But I left a point on the screen once I stopped moving it. I didn't pick it up. And now I've got something of an ellipse. And I'm going to put my finger from my other hand down on the screen, and now it pops into circle shape, and I let everything go. Now, this isn't exactly where I want this. I want to tweak this a little bit. So I'm going to select it, since it's on its own layer, with the arrow tool. And now I can move it, resize it, reshape it, and still keep that circle essence that I need to hold on to here. And I'm pretty happy with that is. All right, now I can go in and I'm going to do another layer here. And on that new layer, I'm going to draw in the ear. And I'm going to draw in the shoulder and shirt. And actually, I'm using the wrong brush for this. Hold on, let me back that out. Go back to our taper brush. Just because I like to have my points taper off there, just like so. And there we go. There we go. Get nice smooth strokes, that's what I'm looking for here. And it can be helpful sometimes if you're struggling with this, just before you really get into any of your serious drawing, just do a little bit of a warm-up. You know, go into a page or a canvas, whatever you want to call it, and just draw some lines, or even better yet, just sketch out some stuff that you're very comfortable drawing. I think I mentioned in one of my previous videos that I used to have a little bit of an obsession with drawing Ninja Turtles. So if that's something I'm familiar with, comfortable with, and I can pretty much do with my eye closed, well, there's a good warm-up exercise to start with. There we go, nice clean lines. That's what I'm looking for here. I think I'm relatively happy with that. Let me go ahead and just kind of correct a couple little more little things here. And I can start moving on to the detail work. And join all that together. And I just want to, again, just a little bit of a tweak on the ear here a little bit. There we go. And then we can move on and we will get in the rest of this. So again, new layer. And then we will go ahead and work on the facial features, just like so. And I want these to be really nice and loose. Don't want to spend a lot of time on them, not because it's not important, but because it's, we need to make it easier to make it look nice lifelike and natural. By trying not to overthink it. All right, there. Notice again what happened with these circles here. I've got like these mismatched edges where the 2 points come together, like right there, and also right here. That's okay. These are going to get erased in just a second when I get his brow line in anyway, so I'm not going to worry about that too much. But let's go ahead and get that brow line in so we can, actually I want to do that on new layer 2. Just makes the erasing a little bit easier. There you go. And let's go ahead and we'll get those lower lids in too. I used to miss out on this lower lid thing quite a bit when I was a little bit younger of an artist. Drawing emotions on faces are really interesting things because the face can really heavily contort itself into a lot of different expressions, a lot of different ways. The muscles have an incredible amount of control. So I'm going to go ahead and just start erasing the pieces that I don't need while I kind of finish up talking about this point with the emotions. Eyes, obviously, are something that really help convey a lot of emotion in human beings. And one of the things I used to miss out on was this lower lid. When we get angry, we tend to squint at people. It's not just moving the eyebrows down and furrowing your brow, but your lower lids close up a little bit as well. So I'm going to represent that here. And it really just kind of helps heighten the emotion that we're trying to get on the face there. And if you don't believe me, just do the experiment, right? Draw a face, get those eyes in there, and draw one set of eyes without a squinched lower lid, and draw one with, and see which one is the better look. For what I'm doing here, I think I made the right choice. And if you don't agree, well, draw it your way when you draw it, but I want to stick with my way. All right. Let's see. There, we get our pupils in now. Actually, I did that not quite right. Let me try that again. A little something like that, I think, is a little bit more in keeping with the way they do it on the show. Just kind of tweak it a little bit. Yeah, I think I'm happy with that. And now we'll get the hairline in. Now, I got to tell you, I always struggle a little bit with Marty's hairline. And the way that I've just kind of figured out how to do it is try not to overthink it. Just get a couple waves in there and just get it down as quickly as you can without overthinking it. And the more you just kind of try to do it quickly, the more I think you'll find that it actually ends up working out in the long run. I never thought that Morty's hair looked natural on him. It looks more like a wig sitting on top of his head than his actual hair. But, I didn't design the character, and at the end of the day, I'm going to go with the character design on this because it is something that obviously a lot of people are fans of. I'm not happy with this unibrow, though, so let me get rid of that really quick. And we will call it from there. All right, so I got that mostly taken care of. Let's go ahead and we'll go into a new layer. And we'll kind of put in the rest of the body parts. So we'll get the arms laid in. But we're just kind of finishing up the last details here. There's not going to be a whole lot more to kind of cover or discuss because it's really just kind of repeating some of the stuff that we've already talked about. Next phase of this is going to be the coloring phase, for good reason. I do definitely want to get some color in here. And the color is really where we're going to do some really interesting tricks when it comes to rendering that portal behind our two characters here. So make sure you kind of get back in the channel. Keep an eye out for that video when it comes out because I think you're going to be really pleased with one of the Procreate tricks we're going to use to get a really interesting portal look that we're not going to spend a whole lot of time hand drawing. More than anything else, let me kind of show you what I'm trying to keep an eye out for. I don't want gaps in my lines like right here, okay? If you notice what we're working on here, we're working on one hand overlapping another hand, and I don't want some sort of a gap sitting right there. I want this to be closed off. Now, this is something that works for my style, so I'm going to give you a fair warning here that what I'm about to tell you is not something that's going to work for everyone. But when I do my inking, I try to make sure that I don't have any gaps in my line work, that nothing has any open pieces to it or anything like that. Again, this is the reason that we closed up this area at the bottom of Rick's torso here. We're going to do the same thing with Morty. I want Morty to to be closed off here. I don't want any open edges. And it might look like he's fairly closed off right now, but let me do this here really quick and point out that if we hide Rick for just a second, there's a lot of open area here with Morty that we need to take care of. So let's go ahead and make sure that we get this in properly. I'm going to go ahead and just continue these lines through to their natural conclusions. That way I can get a nice closed off shape here. Why is this so important? Well, again, it's just going to be something that leads into our color discussion in our next video. So I don't mean to keep secrets or anything like that, but I'm going to give you a fair warning and let you know that what I'm working on here has a purpose. There is a method to the madness, so to speak. So trust me on that tip, and I think that you'll be pleasantly surprised with the lack of serious work that we have ahead of us when we get into the coloring phase in the next video. Now, just a word of the wise as far as the coloring phase is concerned. What we're not going to do is an inordinate amount of rendering where we spend all day blending shadows and light and spending 3 or 4 hours on it. Remember, the end product here is really just kind of something a little bit cartoony. And so because it's cartoony, we're going to just be doing big, bold shadows, big, bold light, not a whole lot of blending. Just kind of lay it in and get the general idea of where those things exist. So that way we can work towards a finished drawing a little bit more quickly in that sense. Just want to give this thumb a little bit more attention. There we go. And now we can finish sketching in our gun, and we'll kind of go ahead and call this quits. So again, look, I'm working on a precision piece of machinery, and therefore I'm really making sure that my straight lines are very straight, my curved lines are very clean. I'm not going to settle for anything less than nice, clean precision when it comes to these parts. I'm also going to shrink down my line. I'm going to go to, let's do this, my non-taper brush. We'll shrink down the line a little bit and get some of these detail elements in. Not sure I'm happy with that line. I think it might be a little bit wonky, so let me go ahead and just put it back in. Like so. All right, we're getting there. It's a little sloppy. I'm gonna try that again. And we can get rid of this little piece right here that we don't need anymore. Actually, clean that up a little bit too. That's just a thinner line. Get a little bit more detail. All right, and let's go ahead and we'll add in our button here. Nice easy circle. So I'm just gonna use the trick we've already discussed to put that in there. And I'll just thicken up just one side of it, just a scotch, just to give it a little bit of depth. All right, as I zoom out a little bit there, again, it's subtle, but it kind of gets the job done. Okay, and let's go ahead and we'll put in, actually I'm going to thicken up the line just a little bit now, and we'll put in this little control panel here. Nice straight lines, letting Procreate do the work for me. There. Close that off, no open gaps. There we go. All right, I think we got a little something there. Let's go ahead and add Rick back in after I collapse all the Morty layers together. And I want to collapse Rick together too. All right, so I've got a layer of Morty, I've got a layer of Rick, and notice what we have here. We have this little area. Let me kind of highlight it here a little bit. This area right here where we have some serious business going on that doesn't seem to make sense. We got an elbow overlapping with Morty's back, and those lines, you know, are going to get a little bit confusing here. But we are going to separate all this out when we do coloring in just a little bit. So I'm going to kind of call this quits right here. I'm pretty happy with what we got. We'll just back out that red circle we don't need anymore. And I'm saying that we're ready to move on to the color layer. We haven't really done any inking for our portal and that's fine. We're going to do that all in color with a couple Procreate tricks in the next video. So this is the point where we're going to sign off. Just ask you one more time to make sure you hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so already. Again, don't forget to leave some comments if you have any or any questions. And hope to see you again soon. Thanks again. Take care.